So picking up with the Books of Doom Part 4, if I'm going to be honest with you guys, this, I think, is the best issue of the whole series. And the reason why is because there's no great big huge, Doom trying to hide himself from the world. There's none of that stuff. This focuses almost exclusively on Victor Von Doom and how he views himself. Now, we'll show him getting to the temple and we'll learn that kind of stuff, but for the first half of this, it's strictly Doom and how he views himself. And this is why I love this so much, because Ed Brubaker does an amazing job of looking beyond the character of the Doom that we know and looking at him beyond the mask and who he is on a fundamental level. What he tells us is that climbing the mountain was treacherous in the extreme, to say nothing of the fact that Otto did not give Doom a map. He didn't give him an exact location. Doom had to basically wander around Tibet and find this place on his own. He had to wander around and ask different people if they knew anything about it. The problem with this is that this Temple of Monks was so secretive that even those individuals who did have some inkling of information about them were not really willing to come forward and give them that info. Now, something that I do want to point out here, for those of you guys who are Doctor Strange fans or who know a little bit about Doctor Strange, this is not the same temple as the Ancient One. This is a totally separate location. The Ancient One's temple is around the same region, but this is a different sect in and of itself. Now, there are a lot of similarities between Doom and Doctor Strange, and there is actually a team up that deals with Mephisto, with Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange. And of course, I'll cover that once we get closer to the release of the Doctor Strange movie. But the fact remains that for Victor Von Doom, he always sort of saw himself as above normal humans. He always saw himself as above everybody, virtually everybody that he met. But the issue with this experience is that it's so humbling because he's at the behest of everybody else. If he truly wants to find this temple, if he truly wants to find this location, he's going to have to rely on the help of strangers in order to access it, to say nothing of his own individual wits and his own intelligence. Now, the other half of this is Doom still struggles with the dreams and the nightmares that he experiences at the manipulations of Mephisto. Now, during his time with Valeria, she was sort of a sedative, and Doom even addresses this. He says that Valeria was a sedative for these nightmares. When he was with her, he wasn't experiencing these dreams. Now, this tells us a couple things. It tells us first that Mephisto's power over Doom is limited strictly to how much Doom allows Mephisto to influence him. And it's also due to the fact that Doom, in and of himself, in terms of how he is right now, is still relatively weak-minded. He's strong and intelligent in terms of his capabilities, but when it comes to him as a character, he's not as strong as he would like himself to believe. And so the result here is that he's constantly tormented. Mephisto constantly plays and toys with the mind of Doom, telling him that his soul is going to be taken eventually, that his mother's soul was captured, and that his soul will be captured as well, that he was doomed from birth because his mother had been toying around with, mysticism, because she'd been messing with black magic. She had basically doomed her son to a fate that would be the exact same as her own. And so what happens is that as Doom is making his way through this mountain region, he's eventually set upon by a Yeti. Now, this is kind of funny because in Marvel Comics, these things do exist. Yetis, Bigfoot, so on and so forth, they do exist. You actually have Wendigos, which is a literal being, and it's basically kind of like a werewolf style plague that passes from one person to the next. And it was a longtime enemy of Wolverine for a time. But the fact remains here that Doom is more or less on his own. There's no one here to come and rescue him. And facing off against a Yeti is a very formidable threat, simply because of the fact that this Yeti is not wildly intelligent, but it is ferocious. And so Doom uses what tools he has at his disposal. He does what he can against this thing, but in the end, it really just sort of resorts down to a bomb that's planted in the mouth of this Yeti that allows it to explode. Now, what Brubaker is telling us here is that despite his lack of magic, Doom is not without his resources. He's an extremely resourceful person, and this really just builds into his intelligence. It builds into his quick thinking. It builds into his aptitude for doing what it takes to get out of a situation, so long as he doesn't allow himself to be overcome by that situation. But as he continues his journey and makes his way, he finally finds this Tibetan temple on the side of a mountain. And when he enters, all the monks are absolutely stoked, so to speak, to see him alive and well. And the reason why this matters is because, again, tying into the last video, Otto had stated that Doom was supposed to be their leader. Doom was supposed to be the guy who would come along and take the place of leadership in this temple. And so the fact that Doom survived has sort of solidified this belief system, sort of solidified this legend that these monks had, that someone like Doom would come along. And so what happens is these monks have effectively blended magic and technology together, but they're two separate aspects too. And so Doom basically learns how to manipulate magic at the same time as learning how to advance his own understanding of technology. And this is what he does. He basically begins to meld the two together at the behest of these monks, but he also begins to lay the groundwork groundwork for becoming an effective ruler. And this is something that I really hope you're noticing here, because with Dr. Doom, he is cruel, he is very arrogant, but he's also extremely honorable. When Dr. Doom makes a promise, he always keeps it, regardless of the circumstances. It doesn't mean that he agrees with it a lot of the time, but it does mean that he will keep it. And so because he's such an honorable person, he conveys this to his subjects. He provides them with the kind of things that they need. He allows them to view him personally so that he's not considered to be some sort of unnamed, unseen leader that they know nothing about. And this really stems from his experience with the Baron, because if you guys had noticed in the earlier books, we never saw what the Baron looked like. We never knew who he was. All we knew was that he was just an unnamed guy. Now, in the original Stan Lee and Jack Kirby story, we did see that Baron, but the goal that Brubaker was going for here was to basically show us some enigmatic being out there who had tormented the very life, I guess all the lives, of the Romani villagers during Doom's childhood. And so this would allow Brubaker to come back now and to say, instead of being some guy out there that no one knows anything about, instead, Doom wants people to see him. They want them to know who he is. Now, again, continuing his role as a leader here, he of course assembles various forms of technology, different things like that, and starts monitoring all of the transmissions around the world, begins monitoring almost all these things that are taking place at the same time in order to understand exactly how things have changed in the outside world. Now again, this is Doom beginning to become more of a recluse. This is him moving away from being so intertwined with society and largely staying in and of himself. But what we also learn is that while Doom has been going on this journey, Reed Richards has been rising to prominence. Now he has not yet become Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. He has not yet undergone, the transformation and become part of the Fantastic Four. Instead, he's simply just a guy who, in a lot of ways, used the work of Victor Von Doom to sort of bolster his own reputation. Now, this is really interesting, and this was actually something that Hickman focused on slightly, but Hickman was really more about the overarching disagreements, the overarching view of Doom and Richards in terms of how they saw each other, as opposed to such small things like this. And this is why Brubaker's so good, because he focuses on the little bitty things and allows us to kind of bolster into the entirety of Hickman's run and understand why the feud between Richards and Dr. Doom was so significant. But it also tells us that Reed is not everything that we thought. He's not necessarily a guy that came up with all his original ideas. He's not a guy that did all the work on his own. Instead, he used the work of Victor Von Doom in order to, increase his own knowledge, to increase his own experience. Now, Reed modified it, and Reed is an inherently good guy. It's simply just an example that not all that glitters is gold. And so what happens is, with this revelation, with this recognition that his work is kind of being thrown out there, Doom has somewhat of an existential crisis, in the sense that he starts to view, starts to ask the question, how does he exist in relation to the rest of the world? And he starts having these flashbacks. And this is one of the most important moments of the entire run of the Books of Doom. These flashbacks show his relationship with Valeria when they were children. It shows his experience with his father when the two of them raced off. It showed the presumed death of his father and how Doom almost died as well. But it shows basically all the losses that he's experienced over the course of his life. And Doom comes to the realization that he is the same as everybody else when it comes to, who people are on a fundamental level. That while he did see himself above humanity as a whole, the one thing he shared in common with them was their fragility, how easily he could be killed. And so what he decided to do was basically create a form for himself that would not be so easily destroyed, create a form for himself that would not only inspire fear in those who saw him, but would give him and those who view him a sense of his immortality, that Doom simply cannot be killed. And so what happens is he fashions his own armor that we know now to be the Dr. Doom armor. Now, the reason why this is so important is because this serves two purposes. Again, it's designed to inspire fear, for individuals who see him, but it's also just as much for Doom himself. The perception of being indestructible, the perception of being unbeatable, the perception of being immortal is just as important as actually being those things. If you can get people to believe something with absolute truth, they'll have no reason to question it. And that's Doom's motivation here. If he can get people to believe that he's immortal, if he can get people to believe that he's indestructible because of how he looks, then there's no way to work around that. There's no reason for people to believe that he is not not immortal, that he's not indestructible. And so again, this is just kind of a dual purpose here. It really just shows us that the suit is not just designed for arbitrary reasons. The suit actually has a purpose. Now, if you guys are interested, I can actually do a video on the suit of Doctor Doom, kind of running over it and talk about, you know, what this suit is or what it's capable of and all the things that it can do. But the fact remains that as we bring this video to an end, basically this is Doctor Doom going forward. This is now Victor Von Doom as we know him. And so what he does is he goes forward with the intention of solidifying his legacy, which will ultimately lead him to becoming the ruler of Latveria. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think about this series. Again, the origin of Doctor Doom is incredible. It's one of the best stories that I think's ever been released. And yeah, I will catch you guys later. Peace.